Most everyone can name a screenplay written by or a film directed by John Huston. Some examples are The Maltese Falcon, The Misfits, The Night of the Iguana, Chinatown, Casino Royale, Key Largo, The African Queen, and some not as well known or well regarded, like Myra Breckinridge. He also voiced the wizard Gandalf in the 1977 animated film The Hobbit. All in all, he won 2 Academy Awards and 3 Golden Globes. His father was actor Walter Huston, who won Best Supporting Actor for The Treasure of Sierra Madre. His daughter is Angelica Huston, who won the Oscar for Prizzi's Honor. Described as a lusty, hard-drinking man in his first years in Hollywood, he had several incidents, some involving just that, hard drinking. What prompted my looking into this was a visit to Grandview Cemetery recently in Glendale, California. It was first brought to my attention by historian Lisa Burks and also confirmed by my friend, historian, author Mark Masick. And there was a woman's grave in Grandview by the name of Tosca, and I found her story really interesting. Now, first off, before Tosca comes into this, in 1933, a Thursday, the February 24th, when John Huston was only 26 years old, he was in a relationship with an actress, Zita Johann, who co-starred with Boris Karloff in a film called The Mummy. John Huston had too much to drink one day, and he was driving with Johann in the passenger seat, and he hit a parked car at this intersection, the corner of Franklin and Grace in central Hollywood. Johann was thrown forward through the glass windshield. She was hospitalized in critical condition and suffered head trauma, including a concussion and a 2-inch scalp laceration. John Huston was charged with drunk driving. He was found guilty, and he was fined a total of $30. 6 months later, it happened. Another accident. This time they say alcohol wasn't a contributing factor, but it had worse consequences. On February 25th, 1933, Huston was driving a car that he borrowed from his friend Greta Neeson. Traveling eastbound on Sunset Boulevard, he picked up a hitchhiker. He never saw the woman who stepped off the curb between parked cars at the corner of Sunset and Gardner. The woman's name was Tusa Rulan, an actress and a dancer, and the wife of Brazil's answer to Rudolph Valentino, Raul Roulien. Raul was making Spanish-speaking films in Hollywood. So all through Los Angeles, there were train cars. They called the Red Line, and they were above-ground railways. Sometimes you could still find the tracks in places. Sometimes you could find remnants of where the red cars used to run. Although they've been discontinued, they're all gone now. They've all been junked. And there are some, every once in a while, some pavement will buckle up, and you'll be able to see a remnant of the tracks. I did find a couple in the past and took photographs of them. But this is interesting. It's a rather nondescript, sort of like an alleyway right off Sunset Boulevard. And but this is an old pathway of the red car. And it came from that direction, or well, either way, it traveled down this way. And if you look, it continued on that way. So that's Sunset Boulevard, and it crossed over, and through that tunnel, you can see that since it's been discontinued, there's all sorts of buildings that have been placed where it used to be. So where I just did this freeze frame is actually within where the tracks used to be. So if you follow, as I go down into this map, follow forward, and you could see the tracks are long gone, crossed over Sunset Boulevard, but the space, the tunnel where the tracks were, are still there. Parts of it anyway. So also at this intersection of Sunset and Gardner, there was also there might have been a stop here, a red car stop where people could get on and off the train. There was also an underground passageway somewhere here, one of those ones where you could cross the street, go down the staircase there, cross the street, and come back up here. We did a walk around and haven't been able to isolate where that was. But the reason I'm here is because there was an accident involving the John Huston, the director, the actor, the father of Angelica, the son of Walter, and he hit a woman traveling eastbound on Sunset Boulevard from that direction, heading in this direction. He was going about 30 miles an hour, not speeding. He had a passenger in the car, several eyewitnesses traveling in that direction, and off of the curb somewhere over there, an actress, her name was Tosca, stepped off the curb. Now remember, this is a traffic light. It was a traffic light back then. It was blinking yellow, so it was a cautionary light to the drivers going back and forth. She could have crossed here. She could have crossed it wherever that underground passage was, which has been sealed up since then. But one way or the other, more than likely, because I can't isolate exactly, I always thought it was around the El Compadre, she stepped off the curb in the path of John Huston's car. She stepped out into traffic and was hit by Huston. He hit the brakes and stopped just before he got to her, as she was laying in the street, her hair crumpled, and her chest crushed. Now, in John Huston's autobiography, he recounted the incident. He said, "I was driving from my father's house to Hollywood when I picked up a hitchhiker at a stop signal. A few blocks later, when I was traveling in an outside lane in a stream of traffic, a figure suddenly appeared right in front of my car. In spite of the fact I was only going 30 miles per hour, there was no avoiding it. I struck it and saw it roll. I stopped and saw that it was a girl in blue jeans. She was unconscious. People were gathering around. I picked up the girl and carried her to my car and drove to the emergency room of Hollywood Central Receiving Hospital, just a few blocks away." He was interviewed by the police, as was the hitchhiker who he picked up. They were interviewed separately, and their stories matched. 23-year-old Tosca died 2 days later as a result of her injuries. She never regained consciousness. Her cause of death is listed as crushing injuries of the chest with other injuries. Tosca's remains were taken to the same funeral home that handled Ed Wood, Criswell, Peg Entwistle, who jumped off the Hollywood sign, Virginia Rapé, and Bela Lugosi. The funeral was officiated by Father Talbot of St. Albans Church. Afterwards, her casket was brought to Grandview Memorial Park in Glendale, California, for burial. Now, Huston claimed that on that night he hadn't been drinking and was devastated. "There was just nothing I could have done," he said. "Absolutely nothing." In October, he was presented to a grand jury. Several witnesses testified. Most were sure that Huston wasn't traveling more than 30 miles per hour. They saw him hit Miss Roulien, and she was thrown about 5 feet in the air and rolled 15 feet forward. Huston's own car came to a stop before he could strike her again. Another witness claims that she herself had been waiting 15 minutes to cross that area of Sunset Boulevard because the traffic was so heavy. It seems that no one wanted to use the underground pedestrian tunnel. They spent 3 days questioning all available witnesses to determine if the accident was due to carelessness, and it was announced that the jurors were unable to find sufficient evidence to warrant filing a criminal charge against John Huston. So they exonerated him. It was shown that the traffic signal was in his favor and the victim had carelessly stepped into the street and that John wasn't speeding and had not been drinking. A month or so later, Tosca's husband sued John Huston for $250,525 for damages and funeral expenses. It rattled around the courts for a couple of years, and ultimately he was awarded $5,000 and never worked again. At least not in America. He went back to Brazil and continued to be a star. Even 50 years later, John Huston denied the accident, or denied he was drunk, stating that he was sober. There was a flow of traffic, and she simply stepped out in front of the car into his headlights, and he was only going about 35 miles an hour. Now, there was a rumor that Clark Gable was behind the wheel at the time and that Huston took the fall for it, but that was later disproved as Gable was out of town. However, there have been several incidents having to do with celebrities who have killed people while driving drunk. Howard Hughes was one who drove after drinking and killed, but he wasn't considered drunk enough to be charged. Director and choreographer Busby Berkeley, while driving drunk, killed 2 people and injured 5 others in an accident on the Pacific Coast Highway. In 1985, Vince Neil, the frontman for Motley Crue, was driving drunk and veered into oncoming traffic. The passenger in his car was killed, and the 2 other people he had on suffered brain injuries. He was ordered to pay $2.6 million in restitution and 200 hours of community service. More recently, in 2010, Melrose Place actress Amy Locane, while driving drunk, killed a 60-year-old woman, and as of early 2025, she is still in prison. Killed by drunks: Sam Kinison, Margaret Mitchell, the author of Gone with the Wind, and Princess Diana, to name a few. Ironically, in 1969, John Huston's own 39-year-old wife, former ballerina Enrica Sonia Huston, was struck by a car near Dijon, France. She died after she suffered serious injuries when the sports car in which she was a passenger in, driven by American musician Brian Anderson, collided with a truck. Other celebrities who have been found guilty of drunk driving: Justin Bieber, Justin Timberlake, Kevin Hart, Paris Hilton, Khloe Kardashian, Kiefer Sutherland, Mike Tyson, Tiger Woods, Tim Allen, Chris Pine, to name a few. This isn't to discount the non-famous people who have been killed by drunk drivers, or drunk drivers who have killed people. It's a tragic incident. God bless the people who were killed because of alcohol-related car accidents.